It's time to solve this case. This is the most brutalized man, I think, in American history. I mean, imagine losing your child in the way that that child was lost and being blamed by the media, in large part because the police fed false stories or incomplete stories to the press. And it was just a wildfire of wrongful accusation. And, you know, there's a whole new generation of true crime fans that have rediscovered the story, going down these rabbit holes on Reddit and message boards, continuing to blame the family, continuing to spin conspiracy theories, continuing this absurd story that maybe the brother had something to do with it or do with it. It's just nuts. So I really wanted to set the record straight. It's a very clear-eyed examination of how it's so obvious that this was an intruder.
While carrying a suitcase or carrying a child in a suitcase. And can you also do that demonstration in winter with snow on the ground, that's, wet ground, and also with a spider web in the window, and let's see how that goes.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, there you have it from the director, from the horse's mouth, what the Netflix docuseries is all about. Cold Case, Who Killed JonBenet Ramsey, streaming on Monday, November 25th. Who killed JonBenet Ramsey? Well, an intruder, and I guess the intruder wrote the ransom note as well.
I really wanted to set the record straight. It's a very clear-eyed examination of how it's so obvious that this was an intruder.
I think it was ex-FBI investigator Jim Clemente who actually spoke to John Ramsey at CrimeCon and said something along the lines of, this would be the first time in history, in true crime history, that someone left a ransom note and made a kidnapping demand and left the person there and didn't actually demand anything, didn't actually make a call. So I'd really like to see this clear-eyed explanation for why that this is the logical explanation. I mean, I'd like to see how it is clear-eyed. Now, do you remember in the previous analysis we dealt with John saying that they never did any PR and they didn't hide behind any lawyers? Well, let me ask you, what is going on right now in terms of this interview? Is this or is this not PR to promote this documentary on Netflix? It's doing advanced PR for that, isn't it? Now, it's no mystery what this documentary, which John and John Andrew, but not Burke, appear in, and what every documentary they will ever appear in, by petitioning the case in the media, the case will be solved. Maybe someone will come forward. And then also we want the DNA tested. Obviously, there will not be one single peep about the grand jury indictments or the fact that Patsy turned out to be ambidextrous. And when Patsy's left handwriting sample was tested, I think it was the fourth sample, handwriting analysts felt they couldn't exclude her. Do you agree with John that the way to solve this case is by criticizing the cops and by airing the intruder theory for the umpteenth time in the media? Do you think that's going to lead to a breakthrough? Has it led to a breakthrough after 28 years? So will it lead to one now that clear-eyed Joe Berlinger is on the job? Before we get to the rest of this analysis, I do want to deal with 5 key insights from this latest PR spin to promote the Netflix show. Bear in mind it airs this Monday. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So number 1, it's a DNA case myth. John Ramsey and his apologists have been saying for years that the Ramsey case is a DNA case, and they seem to be obsessed with testing one particular sample. They don't seem to make it a handwriting analysis case. You've got 3 pages of handwriting, as if all the other DNA samples that they do have don't mean anything. And, if you really want to talk about DNA, there's a lot you can talk about based on the DNA samples that were taken. Now, if you think this whole case revolves around one particular smidgen of DNA that wasn't tested, how do you think Gary Oliva and John Mark Carr were excluded as suspects? Well, it was because their DNA didn't match any found at the scene. In other words, their DNA was taken and it was compared to other DNA that was found at the scene. So it's not as though they don't have DNA found at the scene. But John and Joe, they seem to want to insist that if one particular tiny amount of DNA, which is a composite sample, by the way, it's not just a pristine amount of DNA, it's a tiny fragment and it's a composite. And I think part of that sample already contains some of JONBENET's DNA. They're trying to say if that's tested, that's going to solve the case. There's a small chance that it could provide some information. In my opinion, it's not going to provide it because it's a composite sample. In any event, according to People magazine, John said, "We're begging the police to engage. There are cutting-edge DNA labs that want to help and who believe they can move the case forward." But in Boulder, he says the chief of police is in charge. Nobody can come in and help him with solving a crime unless he asks for help. Incidentally, the presence of a tiny amount of untested DNA in the Ramsey case is, I guess, the opposite defense, the inverse of the Amanda Knox case, who says because her DNA wasn't there, she wasn't there. And if DNA was there, it's contaminated, right? If DNA was there, it's contaminated. So if DNA isn't present, you literally throw everything else out in terms of this case. Throw out the ransom note. Throw out the pineapple in JONBENET's stomach and other strange findings in JONBENET's autopsy. So also, if every case boils down to DNA and DNA alone, does that mean Richard Allen should be set free? Think about that case. The live round doesn't mean anything. Eyewitnesses don't mean anything. His confession doesn't mean anything. But DNA is the only measure whether something happened or not? Does that mean Brian Koberger should be placed in front of a firing squad just on the basis of a touched DNA fragment? No. Cases are a mosaic of lots of different evidence, and the Ramsey case is no different in that regard. Anyway, John Ramsey also said, if it stays in the hands of the Boulder police, it will not be solved, period. If they accept help, all the help that's out there, that's available and offered, it will be solved. Yes, I believe it will be solved. Number 2, the police botched the case and they're still botching it. Myth. John is implying here that in 2024, Boulder PD are still the Boulder PD of 28 years ago, Boulder PD of 1996. No, they're not. But this is an excellent point to chafe against, because John can say, for as long as they don't test the sample, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you doing what we want you to do? Because of this one thing you're not doing, you're doing it to spite us. Or you can't admit that you can't do something, or that you need to ask for help. That's the kind of terms in which he's framing it. John and Joe seem to be pretending that they don't know the actual situation here, which is that the small amount of DNA will be destroyed upon testing, which is why Boulder PD have said they want to test it, but they also want to wait until technology catches up, which will increase the chance of a usable test result. Isn't that quite reasonable? Doesn't that make sense? That brings us to number 3, the definition of insanity. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again while expecting a different result. For the past 28 years, that's what John Ramsey has been doing, engaging with the media instead of directly with Boulder PD, criticizing the authorities tasked with investigating his daughter's case, while foisting the same dog-eared theory onto the public in an effort to both control the narrative and blame and embarrass the very authorities tasked with solving his daughter's murder. Let me ask you, how do you think, or where do you think the source is? Where do you need to go to solve the JONBENET case? Are the media going to solve it? No. The authorities, the investigators, law enforcement, the cops, they are the ones whose job it is to solve it. And so you want to be working with them, not criticizing them and undermining them. In my opinion, I think at every single interview John gives to the media, the opposite question for an interviewer to ask John is, when last did you volunteer to sit down for a formal interview with the police, like you're sitting down to interviews with us, with the media? Number 4, Boulder PD releases a statement. Now, if you thought that Boulder PD were just too self-important, too proud, holding a grudge or something, they actually released a statement to say, this is our position on this particular matter. Now, it's not as though Boulder PD have to be told about the DNA. It's not as though they don't know about it. It's also not as though they don't know what to do about it, or that they don't have the expertise at hand to test it. It's also not the way that John and Joe frame it as some sort of mysterious, low-priority situation for the police department. Listen to this. In a statement, Boulder Police Chief Steve Redfern said, "The killing of JONBENET was an unspeakable crime, and this tragedy has never left our hearts." Now, it's interesting that they don't call it the murder of JONBENET. Also, we are committed to following up on every lead, and we are continuing to work with DNA experts and our law enforcement partners around the country until this tragic case is solved. This implies that they are reaching out and that they are capable of utilizing the necessary resources. Then they also say, this investigation will always be a priority for the Boulder Police Department. Number 5, who is Joe Berlinger? It's pretty incredible that he says, in his opinion, John Ramsey is the most brutalized person in American history. What does he mean by brutalized? Joe Berlinger actually made a documentary series about the West Memphis 3, basically, again, apologia. By the way, I've written a book on Damien Eccles and the West Memphis 3. It's called King of Freaks. It's strange. John Douglas appears in The Fabric as a defense consultant in that case as well. The West Memphis 3 case, in this case, the Ramsey case, and the Amanda Knox case. In all 3 cases, John Douglas believes that all 3 suspects are stone cold innocent. Is he right? From a documentary filmmaking perspective, which is easier? To take the defendant's side in a high-profile case, be sympathetic, pat them on the back, make them the victim, and then get your scoop? I mean, that's the way you get your movie, right? You're going to tell their story, the story they want to tell, you're going to tell it. Or do you take the prosecution side and be locked out of all filming and probably get yourself sued in the process? Which is easier? I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.